Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I, on behalf of WIPS TC, would like to welcome our guest, Dr. Shantanu Ghosh. Dr. Shantanu Ghosh obtained his PhD in linguistics from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi in 2006 with specialization in neuroimaging and received advanced neuroimaging training from Max Planck Institute of Psycholinguistics, Netherlands. He has previously taught at IIT Delhi and currently he is professor and director in MIT Institute of English Studies and Research, MIT University Noida. He has academic and research interests in literary theory, language acquisition, speech and information processing, communication, phonetics, and cognitive neuroscience of language. He is keenly interested in the study of AI and ML and ethical aspects surrounding their development and implementation. We welcome you, sir. I would like to request him to please come and share his thoughts with students.
Thank you. I have the mic. Good afternoon. So thank you for introducing me, and I take this opportunity to interact with you at a very short notice. You have been given a very short notice for this talk, I understand. But I'm going to be very brief in my talk. I'm going to share with you my thoughts about how we build the systems that are affecting us all today, especially in the era of artificial intelligence. And one technology that nobody is immune to is the large language models. So, which is at the base model of what we know today as ChatGPT and other stuff. So everybody is familiar, I'm sure. You have used ChatGPT for many other purposes. But what is the basis of the building block of this large language model? Why do we call it a large language model? Because it is based on the principle of combining, cognitive ideas, ideas from psychology of language, ideas from the cognitive neuroscience of language, and a lot of neuroimaging that has gone into building the models which are called the neural network models. Now, I come from a discipline which is known as linguistics, which is the scientific study of language. And very briefly, I'm going to lead you to what LLMs can do for us, large language models can do for us, not only in the space of neural network technology, but also its applications in the field of health neurosciences. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the large language models. I'm going to talk a little bit about how they are built from the cognitive models, and lastly I will focus on the applications of these as to how we can look at the possibility of making discoveries or make an impact on the lives of patients. So on this slide you can see two major figures of cognitive science, one being Joseph Greenberg, who is a linguistic typologist, and the other being Professor Marvin Minsky, who is an AI pioneer. So together they actually laid the foundations of what we talk about as large language models together in general. So what is a large language model? It is a model that is focused on the neural networks which are deep in origin. So you call them the deep neural networks, right? So why is it known as a deep neural network? Because there are 5 or more layers of networks as in the human brain. So that is why it's called deep learning if you apply the neural networks that deep in the layer. So I'm assuming here that all of you are familiar with neural network theory. So large language model technology may be new, but it is based on very old work, like almost 80-year-old work which is based on the 1943 model of a neuron, or the perceptron model as it is called, which is the base of the transformer network. So this is at the base of what we do as large language models today. So this is the unit, the perceptual unit of operation that are used to quantify the ways in which information is processed. In that sense, it mimics the brain, mimics the human brain, which ultimately basically leads to an idea that, okay, we can build a machine which will mimic the human brain in such a way that it can do all the functions of the human brain. Right. So all of you are familiar with Mikolajput's ideas, but what you are not familiar with maybe is this network. So from a very simple neuron, we now have a complex network of all these, modules that are there, all these boxes that are there, some interacting boxes are there are arrows that lead to information flows and all. So this is basically these boxes are all collections of neural networks connected in a particular way that it performs a certain function, and the base of which is always this neuron. You can play around with the characteristics of the inputs of x1, x2, x3, characteristics of the functions f and g, and that will lead to a certain kind of output. Output is under your control based on what the inputs and the functions f and g are. So if you play around with the properties of the inputs and the properties of the functions, you can actually lay down the construction of the network property by looking at various different properties. Just like in the human brain, there are excitatory neurons and there are inhibitory neurons. You can devise logic circuits which will mimic the human brain, and you arrive at this kind of a network. So this is basically a GPT-2 network, which I have shown as a kind of a encoder-decoder functions. These functions f and g are encoder-decoder functions. The inputs are environmental inputs coming from the internet. And what these inputs are, they are based on language data. They're based on written text data that is there in the internet. It trawls the entire internet. This neural network gets trained for a long period of time, and it becomes a repository of the learning, and becomes possible for them to do what is called learning from the learning. So meta learning strategies can be learned. So if you have a situation like that, then you can mimic the human brain. Right? Very briefly, the human brain is basically connected neurons, both locally as well as globally, and it performs different functions. And so if you look at the functions of language, you have many different dedicated pathways that connect between different regions of the brain. So names are redundant, so you can name them X and Y, whatever. So doctors have named it, anatomists have named it in such a way that we don't remember all, because that's the job of an anatomist, right? But what it leads us is to look at these differentiated areas to perform different functions as modules, as functional modules. Just like you had these functional modules, the different colored functional modules. Right? So you try to mimic this network, and you come across this kind of a network for speech processing. And this is what is used at the core of the LLM. It's a technology in which there is a generalized generative transformer. So the transformation happens within this network of different connected modules of the human brain, how it is supposed to process information. So inputs from cognitive neuroscience about single cell electrophysiology, how each neuron will perform in each of these areas, are recorded, have been recorded for a long time, and they are processed in a big data format. right? And we apply signal processing, and you come up with a connectivity network, connectivity of different areas of the brain. And you can verify them using technologies of imaging. So these are data from structural images, which is at the bottom. So these are the structural images from MRI, and the others are, so these two in the middle alignment, so they are the images from what is called the diffusion tensor images. So DTI gives you a ground truth of the connectivity using water diffusion, models of water diffusion using tensor theory. So the encoding of direction as well as the degree of transfer of information can be encoded in the various parameters. Quantify them, and then these, and on the top level you are shown the stylized representation of what the connectivity actually shows. So it's kind of a representation of this. So this is a stylized representation. So this is an individual brain. So this is also DTI, and this is taken from a data of a MRI machine, which is a 7 Tesla machine. So it's part of the Human Connectome project, and I can proudly say that this is my brain's neurons. So they imaged me in this 7 Tesla machine, and we have got this data, so I can show it without any doubt that yes, I do have some matter. And so let us come back to the network. Now you see that these networks have different capacities. And it has been seen that the verbal network, that is the speech network, is very similar to the musical and the visuospatial networks, which actually lead to the creativity. And precisely these networks were chosen because language is supposed to be creative and AI is supposed to mimic that creativity. And so ChatGPT, LLM, the base model, the base transformer model was chosen from these regions and how they process information. So how does the information processing takes place? So they do it in two ways. One is they take some simple to complex entities, like you take vowels and consonants together to put together into syllables, syllables putting together to form words, words put together to form an utterance, a sentence level phrases, clauses, and then full texts. But text is a written thing, so this is a speech network. Say for example, so speech will be used for signal processing, and the processes that form is that from the lower levels a higher level platform is created by utilizing what is called the resonant brain space workspaces. So this is what is evident, and at every level there is a different functional network that gets activated and gets stored in the LLM learning. And that is used as a base for creating. So this becomes the case for creating what is called the digital twin of the language network. So you're having a digitized version of the language network, which is basically a neural network. The biological network is transformed into a digital network mechanism. So eventually, very briefly, you can say that, how do you conceptualize this? So you have an acoustic signal of the utterance that is converted into a mental activity in the phonological system, which is then has a morphophonemic or sandhi rules kind of a mechanism. Then you have word meaning lexical, then you have structural or syntactic phrasing and dependencies like you have in computer coding, and then you have the functional semantic, that is the meaning to ascribe to sentences and words, and then you have discourse, text, and other larger contexts, larger textual analysis. And we have leveled them alpha, gamma, delta, and so pi levels. So whatever you may like to name them, this is for convenience we have named them. But what is more important is that each of these levels can give rise to action potentials from single neurons. And that action potentials can be converted into local field potentials by recording from the EEG at the scalp. So those are all in the signal space. So sensor space is converted to signal space, and the signal spaces, these are time series. And you can then create brain maps by doing time series analysis on them. So now we are working on the digital twin. right? And then you can do the dynamic structures, you can use IC analysis, you can use PCA, and you can use your machine learning techniques to determine the ROIs, regions of interest, from where you can do the principal component analysis, and then the network properties using graph theory. So you can see the application of many different processes of this complex network, which is basically a behavioral network, language as behavior, right? So you have transformed it into a digital side. You have had digital twin. The role of memory is very crucial. So I have not used attention as at present because it's already a part of your LLM. Your attention guiding these processes very, very strictly. So they're already, but memory plays a very crucial role because you have to retrieve and encode information. Languages does that job, right? So memory is a very, very important component of the LLM network. You have the entire base where it's the library. The training period that is there, training comes from the memory. In the LLM, training happens in the memory. So your structural network that is there can be taken from a case study, which is in autism. So I just very briefly, what is autism? It talks about in the brain, it's a physical condition where social networks are not formed in the patient. So they are averse to loud sounds, they are averse to connecting, they don't look at each other, so social conditioning and language suffers in the patient. So the reason that people think is that either there is local over connectivity or global under connectivity in the brain. There's something wrong with the connectivities. So various theories have been applied to look at how complex information is, or simple information is converted to complex representation in the behavioral side, which can have a digital twin side, right? So we did an experiment where we used basic auditory perception using fMRI in children with severe autism with respect to normal control children. So we try to understand what is this. So there are two groups. There's an experimental group of 11 and the control group of 9 patients, and then we designed an fMRI experiment and we used a 3 Tesla scanner. And this is what the experiment looks like. So you have alternate segments of the sound stream, which the listener is hearing, and the auditory cortex is responding to it. So you have the points which are yellow are the periods where the scanning is taking place, and the green and the blue and red are the ones which are the experimental conditions, experimental stimuli, which is amplitude modulated sounds versus core tuned sounds, so pure tone sounds. So there's an activation condition and there is a baseline condition. So when you create the two maps, then you subtract the activation condition from the baseline condition to create the functional map. So you have these fMRI time series, and then you can determine the time series maps. And those maps that we had shown over here, so these maps can be shown as connectivity maps from here, and from there the other maps can be built. So we have activity maps from here. The experiment actually gave me activity maps from here. If I had used an EEG, I would have used these maps, or MEG, I would have used these maps. Sometimes I can combine them into a multimodal representation. And if you want to establish the ground truth along with that, processing pathways, so you use DTI alongside that, so you have more and more information coming. So you can build the digital twin, enriching it as much as possible, and it can be put in a digital format for you to have further processing. So when you go to this, how do you extend it to using cross-modal data? So you can create these maps. So this is from the morphometry. We have used this as a core. So this is as a filter. And this is the actual network from DTI. So this map is from the cortical thickness map, surface area map, and the cortical volume maps, and use it as a kind of a filter, use it as a mask for this particular setup, which is the actual actual physical network, highways, pathways, and then you combine them and you can make these kinds of maps. So these findings are like, so where you can locate the highest possible activity or lowest possible. So this area is an active area. So this area where there is a hypoactivation. So blue areas are marking the hypoactivation areas. These areas are marking the hyperactivation areas. So you have a heat map that can show you. So you do a lot of statistical processing and you can come up with these. So building these maps enable you to work with large language model basis, but this becomes the basis on which the language maps, the LLM model itself is kind of structured. So you have the ground truth established from these kinds of imaging maps. You have the computational theory built on perceptrons and Macaulay-Pitts model of neural networks, and you make it in a complex order for a deep neural network to establish the large language model of the training model per se, so the base model, and then you give it inputs from the internet, the text. So why is it known as a large language model? Because this transformer network, this neural network was trained on language text, language-based information. The logic of language was built into this. And you can fine-tune the parameters by using hyperparameter flexing and all those activities. So I think I'll stop here. And if I'm ready to face questions, if you have any specific questions. Yeah, that's my end of my talk. No questions? Yes.
Any day in future,
Huh.
will there be any scenario that we can mimic the human brain?
We are trying to do it right now.
Human brain, utni hi learning, utni hi speed of learning
Well,
के साथ
tell me one thing.
storage too.
Tell me one thing. Could you even 10 years back imagine that we can process translation with such speed and accuracy that we do now as simultaneous translations? So you can use speech into text, convert them into, so you can have a link to the API. And so this is basically the speed, the computational power has increased manifold. So if you have a technology stack that can take care of that right now, you can do it. You have the technology today. And tomorrow, you can always mimic a lot of other things. But that does not mean that the human brain does it the same way. So engineering solution is about finding the solution. If it works, it works. We don't care about how we are doing it. Right? But if it is doing it, so there is also a concept of biologically inspired computing. The first example was the neural network. So it has stayed with us. The technology is old, but it has improved vastly because now you can build the technologies by combining different kinds of characterizations of the different regions of the brain. We have done detailed studies, neurophysiologists have done detailed studies. You can combine them into making these.
So you were telling about meta learning.
Yeah.
We would be utilizing it for this mission.
Yes, we can use it for our machine tool. So this is going to be an assistive technology. Yes.
Sir, what do you mean by digital twinning?
Digital twin, let me be a little bit more specific about this. See, you see, I brought in this. So here on this side, so this is the linguistic processing happening. You agree with me? So from acoustic to phonological to morphophonemic to lexical. So this is the language part that is happening, language and speech processing that's happening. And this is a behavior. This is a human behavior. Right? So you are doing this, I am doing this while we are not talking normally. We are encoding and decoding speech. Right? So if you are encoding, so it goes from this direction. If you are decoding, you go from this direction. So I've shown only one direction, but it's actually both directions. It can be possible. So encoding and decoding is taking place all the time. So this is a behavioral. This is a psychological. It's there in the mind. It is not there in the brain. So we want to have something which we can study as a record, as a physical record. So we have to convert this mental activity into something measurable. So here with the help of instruments, we are capturing this data. over here, here and here. Right? So this is the data that is captured physiologically in some format which can be stored digitally. And then from this we built the digital twin. So this is basically mimicking this behavior in behavioral network into this. The process and network both are being mimicked over here. So that's a digital part. So this is a digital. So this becomes the digital twin. Is it clear? So all these things are happening as part of our social cognition. So we are attempting at our in our institute, we are attempting a computational theory of social cognition.
Sir, we have seen Neuralink project of Elon Musk. How this can link with that
You are?
project?
Huh?
Neuralink project.
Give me funding from Elon Musk, I'll tell you.
No, sir. How this can link with what you said?
How Neuralink can link with it?
Yes, sir.
Why should I tell you? I'll tell Elon Musk.
Sir, we have seen a small chip is inserted into.
हाँ तो वो उनको करने दो ना. मुझे फंडिंग देंगे तो मैं बताऊंगा उनको कि कैसे हमारे साथ कर सकते हैं. हमें फंडिंग नहीं मिल रहा तो मैं अपना डिस्क्लोज क्यों करूंगा? I have my own project as computational social cognition and computational psychiatry. I am trying to do that. If he wants to give us money, I will welcome it, but I will not share my data with him unless he gives me money. I'm very clear about that. We can do a lot of things. We can use prosthetics. यहाँ पे we can use prosthetics. We can use this to control movement of arms. So मान लो Parkinson's में ऐसे ऐसे शेक होता है. I can implant a probe inside and we can have a machine by which I can give inputs to that probe which will neutralize the machine. I am giving one example. I will not give any more.
Yes, sir.
This is one example. Don't ask for more. I will start asking money from you. Neuralink is an assistive technology. It has immense potential to mitigate the lives of patients, the quality of life, but at the same time it can be misused also. And that is why it is not a technology for the future. It is supposed to be regulated. It is a technology of today that needs to be regulated. ठीक है? Elon Musk has a lot of money. He can buy the ethical views. I know, well, whether he has done it or not, I do not know, but he has managed to get the ethical clearance. And that raises a lot of other questions about how to use AI. The ethical dimensions of the use of AI, either for the benefit of society or for the destruction of our society. Both are possible. It's like the atom bomb. Atomic energy and the bombs that we create, the destructive power can be used, the power of the atom can be harnessed both ways. Which one you choose is up to you. So this is the science behind it. The Neuralink parameter is an application of that science. I hope I have answered your question. Anybody else? See, what I was trying to say. Yes, you want to say? Yeah.
Sir, I wanted to ask, like, there is a theory that the brain is always active, let's say. Okay,
it's not a theory, it is the truth.
My apology.
No, it's the truth.
It's a study.
The brain is active till you die,
yes.
And even after death, it is active for some time.
So I was about to ask if the electrical signals of an active brain that were present during your screening and your studies did hinder your findings.
I don't think I understand your question. Can you repeat it?
You just told us that the brain processes inputs and outputs in terms
Yes.
of the heat, with the heat map you told us, within a high electrical signal and a low electrical signal. So since there are always electrical signals in
Yes.
the brain that are
Yes.
on the other parts than which you are studying, did they hinder your findings?
Yes, okay. So now I think it depends on how you capture your data. Suppose you have the electrodes, scalp electrodes, which are very far apart, so it is not likely to impact much. But if you have a high density array, say for example 128 sensors or 256 sensors on your scalp. So there is always a possibility that there is a cross contamination of the signal, right? For that, to address that, we have what is called pre-processing of the data. We look at artifacts; they can be removed by matching patterns, pattern matching, and using ICA and PCA, we can remove the signals which are contaminating. Now, when it comes to cross contamination, we have techniques like autocorrelation and cross correlation, which can be used in ingenious ways to nullify the factors that you are trying to say. And then we can have the process data, which will be fairly immune to all these contaminated data. So after you do the pre-processing, only then you can do the actual processing of the data. So we are setting up a lab where we are looking at the we're going to set up a digital twin of the human brain with respect to EEG and MRI, and possibly also using DTI. So if there is further funding, then we can also use some genetic data to create an atlas of the digital twin of the human brain. So we are attempting to do that as kind of an atlas, to use this digital twin for the purposes of not only education, for training our scientists and students, but also to use it as a tool for clinical processes, to monitor and diagnose early the problems that can happen especially for the aged population, Parkinson's or Alzheimer's or even autism. So you do an early detection and you can formulate a strategy to actually manage that condition. So if you detect fairly early, you can do a lot of improvements in the quality of life by modulating and giving them the correct input. And maybe some treatment procedures may come out of it. So this is a laboratory for establishing social cognition as a digital twin. So social cognition is the model, and we are formulating a digital twin because it's very easy now to use the BERT model or the Roberta models or even the base LLM model, because these are all language developed models that are based on language, which is very easy to mimic. Did I answer your question? You asked what we are trying to do. So, any others? I think for such a short notice, I think there are so many questions. Thank you for the questions, and I'm always available. So I'm pretty active over here. So I'm active on Twitter, so you can follow me, and with the hope that you will all go for renewables to carry us forward in the 21st century. So this is my small message to you, and I will be happy to have students for the PhD program. If any of your friends or you want to do a PhD on social cognition, digital twins, using the latest technologies, using a supercomputing facility, 10 petaflop supercomputing facility we have. And we have active collaborations with Johns Hopkins University and Harvard Medical School that I'm always welcome to discuss internships or projects or PhD with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing such an informative session with all of us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for inviting me.